Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Fresh Pulp Magazine Dark Matters Podcast. Dark Matters Podcast is sponsored by Fresh Pulp Magazine. I am Jay Austin Yoshino. I am the host of this podcast. This is my illustrious co-host. I got to find another word. My indefatigable co-host, Margari Hill. She is the executive director and co-founder of Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative. Margari.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's always great. Saturday morning for me, where I get to nerd out with my good friend.
Heck yeah. That's what we do. I want to tell everybody that Margari is the executive director and co-founder of Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative. They're one of the sponsors of this podcast. They do anti-racism collaborative training. Please go and check out their Twitter, their Instagram, and their other social media. Like and share, subscribe, donate, do all that good stuff. They're a really great organization. I really enjoy working with them. I also want to let everybody know that this is also co-sponsored by Fresh Pulp Magazine, and this is not free. The streaming platform, who I will not mention until they give us free junk, costs money. The books and stuff that we like to review cost money. All that stuff costs money. We don't really actually get paid, but it helps take the edge off when we get little donations. $3, $4, $5, 99 cents. Whatever you want to do, head over to our Ko-Fi. There's a tip link in our Twitter. And before we get into today's topics, I want to mention to people that Dark Matters Podcast is not a podcast that is designed to tell people what to like and what to watch and what to enjoy. That is not our objective. Our objective is to help people critically deconstruct and analyze the tropes, harmful and otherwise, that are being presented to us and portrayed for us in this media, in books, in television, in films. Because we are a nation that tends to consume uncritically. And I think in an effort to combat things like racism, combat things like misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, all of these groups that we are in solidarity with, we like to help people deconstruct this because they may be being nudged toward a certain way or to a certain point of view without even realize it. So that's our objective. So this week, what do we want to do? We want to go with the full gamut because we've got a lot. We've got the new Ahsoka episodes. We've got Foundation. We have potentially and we have we have a little nerd thing possibly. Do we want to do all of it? Let's be disciplined this week. I want to try and keep us around an hour. And let's just say, I really like talking with people about this, and I would love to do a 3-hour segment. But so let's talk about. I don't have a science roundup because we have so much to talk about. Once we reach a little bit more equilibrium with the episodes, I'll bring the science segment back, which may be next week or the week after.
Yeah, I would love. I love the science roundup. I think that's important, but it's also great to go do a deep dive. I think a little bit of nerding out. So I'll start. Dune has been postponed to 2024.
Yes.
And it is related, right, to AI, which in the Butlerian Jihad is they get rid of all thinking machines, right? Because we're talking about good writing. If you're going to have good writing, and creative writing, you need that human element. But, with the strikes, it's they're trying to replace and cheapen the writing by utilizing AI. So that is that kind of irony of that. But with the postponement, what we really hope is that that the WGA is able to prevail and that the demands are met. So still solidarity with all workers who are fighting for their rights. It's
that the irony is not lost on me. The idea that we're fighting AI in the WGA, we're fighting against AI, but also the entire subtext of Dune is this Butlerian Jihad, as you pointed out, the fight against machines. That's awesome. I'm obviously, yes, I'm in we remain in solidarity with the WGA. We currently are only reviewing things that were written before the strike occurred. And it's entirely possible that we will run out of runway at some point in the not too distant future. But I also wanted to say that this is not a nerd element, but part of the development of what's happening in the WGA is that one of the studios has hired a PR firm to manage the crisis of the strike. And I think that it says so much about late stage capitalism, but also the United States, that executives would rather hire somebody to manage the optics than simply manage the optics, right? Than simply just do what they're supposed to do. So they're already trying to manufacture consent by making it okay for people to say, for making it okay for studios to union bust. That's really all it is.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So if you're in the LA area, go and join some of those strikes. Give a writer, take them out to lunch,
Bring some water, bring some bring food.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There is an article that I sent, part of our nerding out segment too, that I sent, which was about North Korean science fiction. And I'm fascinated by this. One of the things I love, because I do collect like science fiction, not just books and stories and magazines and other stuff from places that you wouldn't normally find it. Like I do have a couple of things from, for example, Iran. I have a couple of like I have somewhere I've got an original, like, I'm not sure if it's an original or if it's like local craft, but I have an Empire Strikes Back poster in Telugu. Like, I have a lot of really weird stuff. So I was reading an article about it, about the science fiction from North Korea, and I got to tell you, it's a little bit about. So they don't allow things like superheroes, right, in their science fiction. So it is controlled. It was founded by Kim Il Sung, and they originally modeled some of their science fiction after like Soviet science fiction, but then they kind of went and did their own thing. And I thought it was very interesting how there are certain tropes that they don't allow, but what I found interesting was the reason why, and that's because of what we do, right? And I want to go on record. Nobody really knows what's up with North Korea, so I'm not going to sit here and say they're evil or any garbage like that. On the other hand, I'm also not going to say that having generational leadership pass from one like descendant to another is either Marxist or in any way kind of democratic. But so do you have any take on this? Because I'm fascinated. I want to find some North Korean sci-fi and buy it.
I mean, how would you buy it? Get smuggled out? Like, I mean, wow.
Apparently, someone's managed to get their hands on it.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I'm definitely interested in the kind of storylines. What I found in some of the sci-fi in different cultures is that the trauma that the cultures may, the society may have does shape the kind of science fiction, because that was the reality, right? The cataclysm that they experienced. So we could see that that the types of storylines, there's certain assumptions around what happens to the main characters or who are the main characters is different. So that's what I really liked about reading the Three Body Problem series, right? It was like the kind of tropes that you see in normal like Western novels that
Sure.
wasn't there. And that's also what I enjoy about Japanese storytelling and Korean storytelling. Some of the things that in the African novels, some of the African futurism has been really interesting. So yeah, let's open up to like getting into some non-Western, or not even non-Western, but diverse writers who are coming from different traditions and breaking out of the kind of orthodoxies in story writing. So it's pretty cool when they're projecting that with sci-fi and how they understand technology. Sorry, there's my cat there.
No, it's cool. I got a lot going on back here too.
We're gonna talk about like the weird creatures in Ahsoka, which I'm just like,
yes.
Okay. I have issues with the function of those cats, because we know with the genetic modifications, when you breed cats to look a certain way, they actually have respiratory issues and eating
Right.
issues. So
I
I
do.
don't know.
I
Should
do.
we go in?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to add one tiny thing real quick, just to kind of beef up your point just a little bit, which is the reason why I started Fresh Pulp, gosh, like 16 or 17 years ago, was in order to get more more diversity in science fiction. And granted, the industry has sort of caught up quite a bit, but but yes, you're right, not just non-Western, but diverse voices. And also, I do think that there's a level of being able to understand people by participating or I don't want to say consuming, but participating in their art, right? And science fiction is no different, right? Science fiction is basically it's a very good way of determining what or how people dream about or see themselves in a potential future, which is why I'm interested in more of the sort of, as we put it, theoretical science fiction and less of the really sort of fantasy. So, are we going to start with Ahsoka? Or are we going to?
Yeah,
Let's start.
let's just
Yeah,
get
yeah.
in. Let's
If
start in.
yeah. If we have time for foundation at the end, we'll do it. If not,
No,
we'll
we'll
come back.
find time. So let's give ourselves like maybe a good, if we have at most a half hour, but I don't want to spend a half hour in Ahsoka. I mean, I find Star Wars lore is so
Convoluted.
contentious and
Oh,
convoluted. There's so many novels I can't follow.
sure.
I mean, if I spent the rest of my life trying to understand that all the derivative content, I wouldn't have time. I mean, I
You're
don't.
right.
And
You're 100% correct.
and then there'd be like people yelling at me and stuff. Like, I mean, I would just, so yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'm gonna make a lot of Star Wars folks really upset. 'Cause I didn't watch Rebels, so there's certain things that were happening there that I was just like, so yeah, let's maybe give it maybe 20 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, we do it. We can do
Okay.
it.
Okay. Let's give it 20 minutes.
Uh,
So basically, and surprisingly, I'm gonna do the beats real quick. And surprisingly, there isn't a whole lot of beats for something that was basically 2 1-hour episodes. But basically, they set this whole thing up with a special episode from the book of Boba Fett and the Mandalorian. And basically, Ahsoka is a pre-Empire Jedi who, during the Clone Wars, kind of rose to sort of prominence, but eventually left. So this story picks up basically 20 something years later, right? After the fall of the Empire. So, and um, essentially, there's a woman that was in the Book of Boba Fett named Morgan Elspeth, or Elspeth Morgan. Anyway, Morgan Elspeth, who is she is a witch from the Sisters of Dathomir, and she has an artifact that she's hidden. Ahsoka's looking for it. She finds it. She takes it into her custody, but she goes to find her old Padawan to help her decode it. The Padawan takes the artifact, runs off to her little like prairie apartment to decode it. All of a sudden, these 2 dark Jedi who you see in the I'm sorry, I blew past that. These two dark Jedi you see in the very first scene show up. Well, one of them shows up, stabs her, takes the artifact, runs off, right? And then next thing you know, she's waking up in the hospital. Ahsoka's there, and she's like, like, why did you do that? Why did you leave and take the artifact with you? Like, you screwed up. And then they get a lead from the robot, one of the robots that attacked her. They get a lead from its brain that it's on that they need to go check these shipyards on Coruscant. So they go to Coruscant. I feel like I'm just blowing past a lot, or there just wasn't a lot there. But basically, Lady Elspeth is one of the primary antagonists. These 2 Dark Jedi work for her, and the artifact is supposed to point them towards where Grand Admiral Thrawn is, because they want to basically bring him back to the inner, the core worlds, reconstitute the Empire, and then destroy the New Republic. So basically, when they go to find this, one of these old shipyards that used to be owned by Morgan Elsbeth, they find that basically like all these people who are working on the shipyard who supposedly have converted to the New Republic are basically just all like legacy Empire people. They try to kill her and Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who plays General Syndulla. They plant Ahsoka ends up getting into a fight with this other Jedi and another droid, which again is completely weird to me. And Syndulla basically manages to put a tracker on this ship that's trying to escape with the warp drive core, and that's pretty much where this episode. And by the way, please inject anything I missed, because I felt like there was just a lot of kind of fluff in there, you know. But anyway, like, and also her Padawan, basically, who's a Mandalorian, at the end of the episode, decides that she's ready to come back and be a Padawan again, even though, like, the Jedi training robot was like, whose name I forget, was like, yeah, out of like the 500 like Padawans that I've trained over the centuries or whatever, you don't even rank amongst them as any, so apparently she's like the worst Jedi ever, which I think is a really bizarre way to start out a, you know. Okay, so that's what I have to say about beats wise. So feel free to correct me, inject anything that I missed, and also please give me your takes.
Yeah, these right now. It's beautiful, right? You know, aesthetically, the makeup, it's really cool. The costume, you know, seeing Ahsoka is it's great. And so visually, and I was like, is it that I'm super tired? But like, I mean, the first episode, I mean, I was tired, but I couldn't push through. I actually I was like, I got to go to bed, which is very rare for me to like do that. Like, I was like, I had to finish watching the second episode, and then I went and this morning, no, last night, was it? Yeah, last night. It was the same thing too. Like, I watched that, and I was just like, halfway through, I was like, I got to go to bed. Um, and for those that know me, it's like I'm a late night. I'm a night owl. So
Night
that
owl,
was
yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I was actually gonna text you. I was like, is it just me, or I mean, is this the pacing, like the setup is a bit slow, you know, like in the parts, and that I do think it could use some tighter editing. I think that they were just really spending a lot of time going for the coolness, as opposed to kind of, you know, setting up the shot, you know, and the Padawan, like, I mean, they really wanted to show like she was like, I mean, you know, here is like dystropia, right? You know, thank you for the term.
Dystropia.
I'm on my motorcycle.
Right.
Woo! You know, like I'm a badass on I'm gonna get a motorcycle now and I'm a ride.
Can I inject this? Dystropia is something that Margari and I created to sort of talk about tropes that we don't like, that are not necessarily harmful, but are just either overdone, hackneyed, and just played.
Yeah, like shortcut. It's like shortcut, like, oh, here's a ceremony where she's supposed to speak. I don't show up because I don't
I'm a
care.
rebel.
I'm a rebel and I'm on
Right.
this bike, you know, a hover bike, and they try to stop me, but I don't care. So, yeah, that's the way we're just gonna show like that she's such a badass.
Our disdain for particular tropes, yes.
Yeah, so
we're calling
you know,
dystropia on that one.
Yeah, I mean, is it like
also,
every movie we're gonna do that? You know, wasn't that in Star Trek too?
It's in like all of them.
Future thing, yeah.
And it's sort of, on the one hand, and there is a harmful trope there, which is it sets up this level of impunity for possible heroes. It's like, I can get away with being just because everybody knows I'm a rebel and I'm kind of an asshole, but I'm going to save the universe. So you already kind of know. But I also want to say that on top of that trope, another dystropia was the person that you hand the artifact to, who's supposed to study it, but then disappears with it because they don't really want to be near you. That's been done, right? Like, I feel like it was so predictable that Ahsoka came out, and I can't remember what the character's name is, was just gone. And I was like, okay. But it was too convenient, because you knew as soon as she disappeared, you knew it was going to fall into enemy hands. You knew, right? So it's like, so I think the trope really is our prized or our extremely important artifact or object falls into enemy hands due to my like misadventurism and negligence. Right?
Yeah.
Not because the opposition is particularly competent, but because you're a moron.
Yeah. I mean, for something that's worth it that much, like she was just not just that, and that was so hard to get.
Yes.
That she was just so
I know.
negligent about
Yeah.
that. It's really
Yes.
annoying. Really annoying. No.
I want to also add a little bit of context too, because a lot of people, as you pointed out, they would take forever for them to understand lore. I did not watch Rebels or The Bad Batch or anything. I just wasn't. I don't like that. I don't enjoy that type of animation. And also, like a lot of other animation, the scripts were like whatever. But Ahsoka is like on a scale of powerful Jedi. Ahsoka is she's up there, right? She's comparable to say even Anakin possibly. So one of the few people who has dueled Darth Vader and not only survived but actually injured him. So she's no dunce, right, with the Force. And so I will say that I kind of enjoy so far that they're kind of understating her a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Like, anyway, so that's what I wanted. I wanted to offer
Yeah,
that
she's so like cool. She's like,
right. Maybe a little bit too much, but yes,
I'm gonna fight you. You know,
yes,
she always has that Rosario Dawson. Like, I mean, I never seen Rosario Dawson smirk so much. You know.
right.
You
Sabine
know, I
Wren is
mean,
her name.
yeah,
Yes,
Sabine Wren is interesting. You know, I'm absorbing, right, and Rosario Dawson is Ahsoka is who's like, you know, kind of has
yes,
that same expression through most of the episodes. She's kind of like
yes. Just very
unbothered,
yes,
unconcerned. So it's hard for me to feel the urgency, but I guess
yes, exactly. Yes, I I want to inject this real quick too. A couple of years ago, Rosario Dawson was in court. I want to because I want to be transparent and clear about our
sure,
stance
like
on.
a
Oh, sorry. I want to be
yeah, there you
clear.
go.
I want to be clear about our stance on actors and actresses, actors and everybody artists who are accused of bad behavior. So I'm putting this out there. She was accused along with her mom by a handy person who was trans of assaulting that person. So that person worked for her, was a handy person for her house in California, and there was a disagreement about payment and about assigned duties, etc. And the person accused Rosario Dawson of basically holding them down and beating them basically, and while Rosario Dawson and her mother basically were accused of doing this while they basically shouted, like, they basically said harmful things to this person. This went to court, and Rosario Dawson was basically exonerated. As far as I know, as far as I can research, she was not, convicted of any crime, and she was not ordered to pay any kind of restitution. So the courts found in her favor. That does not mean that she did not do it. But I wanted to be clear about that. We know about this, and to reaffirm that we do stand in solidarity with trans people and the LGBT community.
Definitely. Thank you for bringing that up. And I mean, and it is sort of that tricky thing, right? Like where you can like how do we hold folks accountable? Like we know like the burden of evidence could be a certain way, but then there's also we're talking about people of color, and then if we don't have like if we're not the judge and jury, like we may not as a public get all the evidence, but yet we're creating like we like it did have it did a major dent on her career, like as far as folks who did respect her. And so
Yeah,
there is that distancing that we have. And I mean, I still do have questions. At the same time, I mean, for me, I mean, I definitely struggle with that. I mean, I've had people tell certain narratives or, things going on with me and have
sure.
accusations. And so it's like,
Same.
how do we manage that when I mean I know what that explanation was. um like I'm just like, yeah, those accusations are patently false. And
Yes.
so like it just doesn't represent anything in my reality lived experiences, and I'm just really concerned that that's how somebody imagines, like that's their memory of things. So it's very much a challenge, but thank you for uplifting that. And yeah, like being, knowing the vulnerability of the trans community and workers, and having like when you don't have expensive lawyers and everything. Like, I mean, honestly, like I think in some ways like settling, if you can, trying to come to like mediation, like there's just different ways that we can try to solve conflict in non-punitive ways, but also that honors the disparities, right, of power, where we know the
Yes.
powerful, they tend to have like great lawyers and things that who can back them, which is also
Yes.
very scary, like as somebody that doesn't have a lot of resources, and that somebody could lawyer up, and I'm just like, you know,
Yes. For
have
the
to
record,
acquiesce. Yeah.
I did misspeak. The case was dismissed. She wasn't
Mm.
exonerated, but it was dismissed. So it never actually, there was never any actual adjudication. But I don't know
Yeah.
what that says, but I want to be fair in the information that I put out there, um, and so that people can make up their minds about what happened. And I encourage people to go read about it, and I encourage people to
Hmm.
be critical, and I also encourage people to send us feedback and say, hey, like you're just dead wrong for doing this show or whatever. We want to hear that.
Yeah, and what I mean, the important thing is that when these stories come to light, in the news, in the media, that many of us experience things, right? Like, and that it can bring up all those feelings of helplessness and everything. And so I just really want to send, the kind
Absolutely.
of words of solidarity and understanding that many of us have cases, like either we can't bring cases to court because we know that they'll be thrown out,
Right.
that there is very little restitution for those who are marginalized when you are
Absolutely.
a worker and you're facing things with your somebody who has access to lawyers and power. So thank you for uplifting that.
Thank you, and thank you for those. Thank you for eloquently expanding upon what I've said, and for your words of solidarity, because we're both on the same page. So one of the reasons why I do this podcast together.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to
Well,
sort of touch on this.
you do push me to like think deeper and more and hold me accountable. So,
Same,
you know.
same. So I wanted. So there's a couple of things that I want to blow through real quick, but then land on one more thing. Number one, here are sort of my mini gripes about the show so far. Why are New Republic uniforms so ugly? Right? They are so like that admiral guy in the beginning, and even the admirals in the previous like movies and stuff. He looks like he's wearing like a painter's smock or something. It's weird. And so their uniforms are so ugly. And granted, right? Like the Nazis had was it Hugo Boss, who designed their uniforms. So yeah, you knew they were going to be like. Do you know what I mean? And so, like, the Imperial uniforms are modeled, obviously, after Nazi uniforms. So you knew that they were going to be tight. But couldn't you at least, and even the guys with, like, the little egg-shaped helmets,
Why?
they looked, even compared to the ones from the 70s, they look really chintzy. They look really cheap. And so I was like, okay, that's taken me out of it, right? Because those things are ugly.
Yeah. I mean, I would just be like, I would just go rogue. Like you could not get me in that rebel army with that fashion. Like I'm just like, you
Exactly.
don't put me in that. I mean, and not to say that like my fashion choices are all that great. I'm typically like
Your
I'm
style is,
in
your
modest
styling.
wear, but it's which is the challenge, right? Is like the challenge of like the vanity that we have, but it's just that my own vanity is like, could I join a rebel army? Would I trust them with those ugly uniforms? No,
Heck
I mean
no.
they look inept. Like how could you navigate stuff
That's
with that
exactly.
thing?
It's
No,
worse
you
than being
can't.
redshirted, right?
Yeah, it's just like if you got that hat on,
Right. You're
you
gonna
are
die.
not even a supporting character. You're gonna die. So
Right.
that's
It's
the
like
trope.
it's Star Wars
Ugly
equivalent of being redshirted.
uniform. You're just not. You're not a hero. You have no swag.
I want to say too that these on top of these poor uniforms. Let me look at what I have here. Just in the uniform vein or the set vein, these weird lightsaber configurations really take me out of it. Okay, the lightsaber with the knuckle bow. First of all, that's like huge, and then somehow becomes a circle with like two lightsabers. I hate that. I hate it with a passion. I don't mind the there's the Darth Maul version, which is the two-bladed one, which is kind of like the almost like a Mughal Qatar, but like the blades are longer. Not Mughal, but Indian Qatar. You know what I mean? Sorry, not Mughal, but Indian Qatar. Like, it reminds me of that a little bit. I like that. What I don't like is that they're trying to be cool, like really cool with it, and it's not working, right? Because they had those same ones in Obi-Wan, right? All of the Inquisitors had those weird circle-shaped lightsabers, and I didn't think that they were functional at all.
Yeah. I mean, I would love, well, no. I mean, what did it look like when they were practicing the fight choreography, or like what would this look like if it was like sharp, right? So you have these things that could burn you, like penetrate stuff. So I mean, sharp objects, and you're doing that. So yeah, I mean, some of that is like trying to like level up, but yet they couldn't level up like the rebel stuff. Like it's like the technology of the like, because well, I mean, I guess where we're at, like I've always like the bad guys always looks amazing, except for the stormtroopers. But then they level those guys up, right? Like they're not dumb, like they're not shabby in all of these post productions, but they just can't aim ever.
Yes.
You
And
know,
also, why are you
so
using a robot to attack? Like, why are you and a robot attacking a Jedi? That blew my mind. I was like, that blew my mind, right? Like, either fight the Jedi or don't fight the Jedi, but don't bring your robot into the fight with you, right? So like, and I did, and I will say on that one particular part, and then I'll sort of move on. The scene at the end where the guy like force calls his lightsaber, and like it's coming up behind her, and she just kind of dodges it without even looking. That was cool. That was crazy cool. It was probably the best part of the whole episode, and it only lasted like half a second.
yeah, you're
But
just like, you caught that one. I mean, I saw it too, but I mean, I'm glad you brought that. I mean, there was like cool scenes, but like, I mean, I really feel like, oh gosh, how am I gonna say it? I guess in my one critique, it's like I mean, seeing, because Jedi is supposed to be like samurai, right? Like, so seeing the kind of smug arrogance as opposed to kind of like a purposefulness or groundedness in Ahsoka kind of bothers me a little bit,
okay,
like there's just some of the things, and then the use of force, like where they're just like flying through stuff like that. I don't like that so much, and maybe that's like my sci-fi. Like I'm
flying
like,
through what?
you
What do you mean flying through what stuff?
like she just was like, and just like kind of just. I mean, they were doing that with Grogu too. Like he would just kind of flip, like,
Right.
and it was just like, there's not enough midichlorians in the universe to be doing all. Like, I just don't. I'm not buying. I'm not buying. Like, I
Okay.
can see, like, because like Darth Vader is supposed to be very powerful, right?
Yes.
Right. He's supposed to be like super duper powerful. But did you ever see Darth Vader do all these like shenanigans, like float up? Like he could force push people, strangle them, but now it's like they're doing all sorts of things, like
Wait,
healing people. Like when
when did
did
she
Darth
float?
Vader?
When did Ahsoka float?
She just like kind of like, I think when she came up out of those, like when she made the holes
Right. Oh,
with
she
her
jumped.
thing,
Right. She force
she
jumped.
jumped.
So
She
I will say
forced.
this.
I'm not
Well,
a big fan of the force jump because
I
it
know you're not.
doesn't. The
I think
physics of it, the midichlorianism of it doesn't.
so. Darth Vader, if you recall, Darth Vader, and this was one occasion, only one occasion, but it's actually in Obi-Wan. But if you remember, in Obi-Wan, he actually force grabbed a shuttle as it was taking off.
Yeah,
Right.
that was a lot.
It was
I
a lot.
mean,
I'm not going to lie to you. It was a lot. But things like force jumping, those things don't really, I mean, because it was only like 20 feet. That didn't faze me that much. Obi-Wan jumped over 50 feet in the first Star Wars prequel. Like he jumped from one
but
platform to
seeing
another.
the prequel, these prequels, anything beyond the first three movies, like they try to level up stuff that was
Right.
never in the first three. That's what gets me.
Okay. I
I
see what you're
just
saying.
I would like a more
I see what you're saying.
disciplined universe, like where we could see either the development, right?
Yes.
And you can explain that, but it's like, no, they're kind of going back and retconning all these like amazing skills that didn't
I
exist back then. I mean, you saw like even the sword fighting, like it made sense in the first, like, and I'm gonna butcher this, but like when you're watching it, like in the first, what is it, or the episode 4, right? It's like the new, was it what it? It's
Yes,
original
A New
Star
Hope.
Wars,
Right.
yeah, the New Hope. But Obi-Wan, the sword fighting was like, and it kind of makes it was like an unwieldy thing, right? And then all of a sudden it's like they're like
I
prequel fighting, like
love
what
the
they get
sword fight.
arthritis, they
I
get because it's
love
like
the lightsaber fights in the prequels, though. I'm sorry, I loved
it
it
looks great. It looks
because they actually applied some choreography to it. That part, yeah, that's a part where you and I are going to disagree. In the prequels, that was the only thing, one of the only things I actually loved about it. Because in the first movie, he didn't have, Lucas didn't have the budget for a fight choreographer, and I loved I loved it. That's all I'm going to say. I love the fight choreography.
I'm just saying they would have
I
need
see
to.
what you're saying about retconning their powers. I see that, but as somebody, by the way, and I'm not like pulling rank or anything. I'm simply saying that as somebody who's read most of the books, who's read the comics, there is a bit of retconning, no doubt. It's not totally out, far fetched, but yes, somewhat. To me, it's like whenever you see those westerns, there was a western that was comprised of mostly African American cast recently, like a couple years ago, and like they would shoot somebody and they would like fly off their feet or like do a backflip. I don't like that's what I think you're talking about when you see that it looks cartoonish. So yeah, I like when it's cartoonish. I agree with you. Sorry, that's just this is the fight.
I like a good fight choreography, but if we can imagine like what we could have had, I mean, because like obviously like Darth Vader is like by that time like he's lost all his parts, like he's just like feet and like so that come out and maybe like Obi-Wan Kenobi, like he's like I mean well arthritis, and so
Yes.
that fight would have been like made sense. Like here's some old dudes trying to duke it out, and
Yeah. I could like talk about this element forever, but the two things that I wanted to touch on really quickly. Number one, I love that Rosario is heading this up. I love that her Padawan is Sabine Wren. I really like Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Mhm.
But so far, this show is still very white. It's basically Rosario and like everybody else. Vinnie Thomas made a cameo. The Twitter comedian, the TikTok comedian. But other than that, everybody in that show is basically. And that Jedi robot looks terrible. They need another robot. It looks really clunky. So the
you have Rosario, like, and then what is the name of the actress? I'm trying to pull this up. I have
Diana
like
Lee.
one.
Oh, you mean
Who plays Sabine? So
she's
she's
she's like
Australian Asian.
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, she's like what is the term? I mean, are we
Not,
using like half?
she
I was
is
like, is that even a
she is
term we
she is
use?
Asian Australian, so she is Asian European. I'm assuming.
Yeah, and
Natasha
I
Liu
think she
Bordizzo.
played in like I read somewhere like she. I mean, I think she played in one of the like another martial art or Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Oh,
Like there's some or one of the somebody in the film. So we got to look into that.
right. I will look
Um,
into that.
yeah, but it's like, but that also kind of speaks to like how biracial, like as long as they're like European and Asian, like can get main roles in Asian films. So the kind of colorism that exists there. So very
Yeah.
interesting. Um, but yeah, like I mean, so those are the things like for me for Star Wars, what kind of takes me out is like the rapid developments, and so it's hard for me to understand the time frame of when something happens because either the technology, the fighting looks so much cleaner, the use of like the weaponry or the uniforms of the bad guys looks so much better. And
Like an Andor.
yeah, I mean, yeah, Andor is just it's beautiful, right? But it's hard to like date it because it
Right.
doesn't look dated. And so, and I think that's what we kind of look for in the past is like something
Yeah.
that's like a little bit like, okay, this is from that time period. And so I'm wondering if the set design, I mean, am I missing that? Maybe people could comment and show me like how they fit it in with the timeline and show that the styles change over time. But I would love to see that kind of growth and change, so I can like look at something and I'd be like, oh yeah, like that's, the prequel period. We're going back to before the first Death Star. Now we're at the big Death Star. Now we're at the supernova Death. Like those Death Stars just kept getting bigger and bigger in the series. Like by the time,
which is a dystropia. that is a dystropia, which is this need to continually make, rather than making the villains more somehow nuanced and more competent, they make the threats sort of needlessly and kind of unsubtly bigger. We went from the Empire to the First Order, and the First Order has not only a Death Star, but a Death Star that's the size of a planet. And I was like, oh, come on.
Yeah, this is gigantic, man.
Dystropia. I'm calling dystropia on that one.
Having a solar system, like we're gonna destroy this whole part of the galaxy.
We put targeting mirrors around the galaxy so that we can bounce the beam all over the universe.
The amount of shit. So here's my thing. My biggest beef with the writing of the Star Wars series is how short that Empire was.
Yes. 20 years.
20 years, dude. How do you get that many people in 20 years? How do you get those resources going? Then when by the time Kylo Ren comes in with the First Order, the amount of ships that came through, I was just like, nah, I'm not buying that. Like we need, at least this is the thing I like about Empire, like about Foundation, that you see the time frame, right? Like at least some people go to sleep so then they could come back and it's like, whoa, everything's different. They had 100 years to like leverage some resources, build up. Yes. But 20 years of an empire.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons why they used. Well, I'm not going to get into that because we're probably blowing too much time on this. But I want to say this too because I saw somebody do a TikTok where they talked about, and I want to mention this in pursuant to my comment about dystropia, about overpowered villains, is they use this term when the prequels came out to refer to Rey as a Mary Sue. And while that is not, it's first of all, it's not a term that I like because it's misogynistic, but the criticism of it wasn't wrong, right? The lore and the canon surrounding the use of force powers is very clear. There are people who are naturally gifted force sensitives, but in order for it to manifest its way specifically, Jedi is a very specific type of force sensitive. It's a trained force sensitive. So to have somebody who has never touched a lightsaber before in their lives to face off against, which is a different weapon than using a staff, to face off against a supposed Sith Lord is crazy, right? So to then ascribe that to like, well, maybe they just wanted to tell the story in their own way. There's no story there. That's like if I decided that I wanted to fight Bruce Lee, right? Even though do you know what I mean? And I'm trained, right? I would not ever want to go near Bruce Lee. I wouldn't go near Mike Tyson. I wouldn't, anyway. So I wanted to sort of say that both of the vantage points for that are, one is misogynistic and stupid, and one does not acknowledge the possibility that there was just bad writing involved.
It is bad writing, and then it goes back to then like, oh no, like she's a descendant of the
yes,
or Palpatine,
generational transference of power, yes,
yeah, of like special skills, which royalty, right, in the myths of royalty, that's where that comes from. So I was like, wow, like the power of the first movie, right? Like if they just ended it, and I'm not saying that they should have, because like I really loved Empire Strikes Back, which is like an excellent film. And and then Return of the Jedi, which as a kid, like I loved it. I loved the Ewoks, they're so cute. But the first film was just about a kid who had that potential, a kid from the back ends of, like just poor, and he gets trained and he learns to do some cool stuff. That hero story is like any of us could be that hero, but then they make it like, no, not any of us, some of us,
right?
And only if we have like some special family, right, can be a hero. Right. No, any of us should be able to be a hero, and with training and with discipline, that we can possibly take take that on, but instead, I mean it, and that is still a setup too, right? Like, I mean, it's just like, was one person could be the answer, but still, like, you could just feel like your power in that, or have a ragtag bunch of people come together, and that you could be this regular kid and play a regular kid and play a part in that, in the movement. So powerful. I just thought by the end it betrayed that.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
here we
100%.
go, so let's go into
Right. It went from egalitarian.
foundation.
Yes, let's go into foundation. So basically, quick beats, right? So Sareth learns basically that Empire did kill her family, right? Demerzel, basically, she's playing it fast and loose with trying to rattle Empire's cage. And basically, he responds essentially by saying, yeah, I mean, he didn't say it, but he basically let her know, yeah, we killed your family. And Demerzel basically let the cat out of the bag. Demerzel was so they basically summoned her to the doctor to inspect her to make sure that she could bear children. And she kind of like she was I don't want to say being difficult, because that's not how I want to characterize her. She was being herself, right? She was being strong. She was setting boundaries, and Demerzel didn't like that. So Demerzel was like, basically, yeah, we killed your family, and she started crying. I mean, that really, like, I felt that scene. But so then back on, and that's pretty much the whole that whole storyline is pretty much her learning that her family had been murdered. But there was also the storyline with Hober Mallow, where he encounters the Swarm, and he basically lets them know, hey, look, we know that essentially you guys have this substance that you need in order to survive, that the Empire uses to keep you under control, and you have to tie 10% of your population to the Empire in order to navigate their ships, right? He's like, we have access to this technology to make this stuff. We will give it to you if you basically stop navigating the spacefold ships for Empire. And also, we don't need to use, navigators for our ships. They're whisper ships. They can travel anyway. So the Swarm is like, okay, decides to call Bel Rios and deliver Hober Mallow to them, which I'll come back to. Then on Ignis, right? On Ignis, what is her name? Gale is like, hey, we should all work together. And she's still kind of having a back and forth with Tellum. And Salvor is talking to Loran, who is like, yeah, I'm sorry that I changed my face to look like you, which I thought was an interesting, aspect of the consent aspect of what he did. I was glad that they addressed that. But basically, they're about to eat these like weird, like little like shrimps, and like when they do that, they start screaming. And Tellum is like, oh, you know what? Like, that's just the price that you pay for being one of us. It's the price that you pay for being the good guy. Is sometimes you have to like, it was a very weird harm reduction message. Anyway, and I was horrified by that. But then like Gale gives this speech and is like, we can all defeat, the mule, and if we band together, and Tellum is so happy because she's like, oh, she's coming into her own. Salvor's not buying it, so Salvor like goes off on her own, and because she's like, where'd they go when they took this skiff the other night? Like, they all have their their navigation cache still in here, but this one doesn't. She finds where she went, and then she finds Harry's body. Tellum is like there, like, oh, it's too bad that you found her body, because now we're gonna have to like do something to you, and then end there. But I do want to say, going back to the Bel Rios, like saga, the Swarm oddly and unexpectedly decides not to take Hober Mallow's offer. They hand him over to Bel Rios. Bel Rios and his husband beat the crap out of him. He manages to escape onto his whisper ship and leave. So, and they report this, by the way, to Empire. They're like, dude, this is way worse than we thought. Like, the Foundation has apparently created technology that doesn't require, navigators. And also, they tried to like lure the navigators away from us, right? Oh, there's also Brother Constant and the other priest. They show up they're on Ignis. They were obviously captured last episode, and they have a back and forth with Empire. Brother Constant channels Harry Seldon's like consciousness and has a conversation with Empire, which is basically like, we have ships, we have everything, we can fight, and if we fight, we'll win. But we'd much rather be partners with you. And Empire's like, screw you, and then that's it. So that's pretty much the episode. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I mean, it starts out right with the plight of like black women, right? You know, and the queen's like this gendered thing. I mean, and it was like it's very jarring. It was very compelling, also, just like the status of women. Still, you're like, dang, we're like this far in the future, and we're just reduced to this. That queendom is not the resources that she has to offer. Is, you know, like that they did make it about her reproduction,
Yeah.
and so that was very jarring. And you know, and then the gynecological exam, which is also deeply
Invasive.
invasive. You know, this invasive. It's like, and it's all men. It's not like a woman there. They're
Right.
all there to witness. The procedure is painful. Um, so not only do you have the violation of her privacy, but the equipment itself, like this far in the future, they have to still make it a painful procedure. So the
Yes.
writer is emphasizing that. I was just kind of like, okay, like they're really trying to hone in on that she's harmed by this, right? And making her very vulnerable. Like when she had that shorty, like the self-assuredness and just like diminishing it, diminishing it, diminishing it. Um, so I think that, you know, I mean, either they knew like this would resonate with a lot of women, uh, that how we experience being on examination table, and then those fears, like, but there's also that historic memory of like, and we've talked about this, right? Like the so-called father of modern gynecology used to do procedures on Black women without any painkillers, like just with the belief that Black women didn't experience pain. And so, you know, that like, and then they want to harvest her eggs right away. And so she's like really trying to negotiate her, you know, some type of autonomy. Cause then what would
Right.
be her usefulness, right? If they just, you know, like her leveraging power. So, you know, like in this episode, there seemed to be a lot. I mean, well, maybe there are some of the themes that were split in half, right? It's like one, it's like about children and families, right? Like what makes a family, but also like, but you know, like it's like with her of like her loss of her family, and that she's gonna have to like give birth to this new empire, like how like devastating of being in a relationship or the with someone that is that harmful. So that I think that that echoed a lot there around abuse and power, and the vulnerabilities, like the gendered vulnerabilities. The the second part, right, like where it got to me was the I was like, okay, they're making a big case for veganism right here because one, those little mollusks were like really disgusting looking. Um, but the pain, like if we experience the pain, right, like that it hurt, like not just like well, it hurt like hearing them cry, but if we experience the pain of the creatures that we're eating, would we still want to eat it?
Right.
Uh, that was like a very compelling argument around. So I want to know your kind of thoughts on that. Like, I know they were trying to make a moral point, right, around like that you know there has to always be a little death to move things forward,
Yes.
and that um the ethics around that. And I know it's like we're supposed to question it, right?
Sure.
But at the same time, it's like the other ethical question that we have with oh gosh, what's the name of the captain of the ship? His name is
Bel
because
Rios.
he's Bel Rio. So when Bel Rio says, "Oh, it'll be far worse," he's
Right.
seen the
Yes.
lawlessness of it. Well, that's the places he was going to discipline. He didn't see those peaceful places where they're just like, "Look, we went under stealth mode because Empire sucks,"
Right.
and that there is a possibility of having an anarchy does not mean absolute chaos and things falling apart.
Right.
Anarchy could mean people are just really cooperative, and one person, one vote, they resolve their disputes in ways that maintain people's dignity, and no one person or no one institution has absolute power or has a monopoly on violence. And so I was just kind of like, okay, there's a lot of like ethical things that they put in here. So in some ways, like that piqued my mind more, like my little critical thinking mind, than what I saw around the ethics of Ahsoka. You know, like I mean,
Sure.
I would
Yep.
love,
Yep.
and what I loved about Andor were there were these ethical questions, right? That there was these questions around characters who weren't all like they were gray. Um, and then with Foundation, the writers are trying to do this, and sometimes it's like blatant in your face. Like it's just like, okay, could we add a little nuance there?
Yeah.
Um, you know, so it's like, what is it like to, if you're a true feeler, right, and you open that up, to feel the fear of the animal that you're about to slaughter, right? But I think that that's what indigenous peoples, or even like for Muslims who come from, you know, who observe halal, which it's like there is this, it's like that the idea of the blessing is that this is a creature, this is something um that is sacred, and that and its death has to be honored in a certain way, and it has to be as painless as possible, and that we're not supposed to do this waste. But we now live in a consumerist society where we're just like eating a bunch of things and not thinking about the harm or just even the quality of life of what we're eating.
Yep.
And so I felt like maybe, I mean, that kind of, I thought they were going to go that way, but then it was just like, ah, yeah, we need the protein and just a little bit of death,
Right.
and they just kind of moved on.
Right.
So
But also, you know, in the halal diet, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not even supposed to consume things that tear or rend the flesh of other animals. So it's not even just what, and I know that one of the madhabs is like won't eat bottom feeders either. But I think there's this idea, and for someone like myself, I have you know, I did date you know, a Hindu woman for a little while, and she didn't eat meat, and one of the things that she said was that even having a partner who consumed meat, you know, it had a potentially deleterious impact on her sort of overall spiritual, like I'm trying to look for the word, but basically you know, ideally you don't want somebody who also eats meat or who tortures animals. So I don't want to say karma because I know that's not the right word, but it has an impact on her, you know, being linked to somebody spiritually has an impact, you know, on your spirituality. So the idea that we also sort of, not laterally but vertically, try to avoid eating animals that eat other animals, I think also says something very similar about our own spiritual requirements and makeup. Like, do you know what I mean? So, but going back to Foundation, and again, correct me if I'm wrong with regards to the you know, the dietary, you know, constraints, but going back to Foundation, one of the things that I got from the saga of Sereth was what I see a parallel of in because you're right, she has limited moves, and that character, your take on that character was spot on. I actually hadn't thought of it completely that way, but what I was thinking also was how what I saw in it was, it goes back to something else you said in a previous podcast, which was this need or desire to seek adjacency to power by women of color, right? In this instance, she needed it to survive, and I completely got that. But there's also this element that I find a little off-putting, which is you come from a planet essentially that was pacified and was scourged by empire, and now, you know, in other words, if you look at like British colonialism or Spanish or Portuguese colonialism, there are still people in the second and third world who seek that adjacency, despite the fact that their countries were completely torn up by these imperial powers. Do you know what I mean? And so that's what I saw in it partially. Your point sort of, you know, doesn't negate that, but it adds more context to it, that there is an element of coerciveness involved. But there are people who voluntarily are like, hey, you know what? I know that your people colonize my people, but can we be a thing? And I'm like, that's weird. But it happens, whatever. People love who they love. So, but I also wanted to mention something similar about the Swarm. I was shocked the Swarm gave up Obermallow. I was really surprised. And let me tell you something. The Swarm is like that ship, and the smoke and everything is straight up like a cover of like Earth, Wind and Fire, George Clinton, like Parliament Funk. Like that is a straight up Afrofuturist. Like I want to print that image and like put it on an album cover from like the 70s. Anyway, so that's pretty much what I have to say about. Is there one thing I'm missing? Oh, the Bel Rios thing, the harm reduction. That bugged me because Tellum and Bel Rios, they're very similar in their attitudes towards, like, oh, you haven't seen the whole universe I have, and some parts of it is just like one person's a rapist and he rapes everybody, and I was like, your boss is a rapist. The only difference is that your boss can afford to wipe people's memories after he does it, right? Like this idea, as you pointed out, of there being chaos in the absence of imperialism is ridiculous. It is a harmful propagandist trope. It's a dystopia. Another dystopia, I'm calling it. Just because there is not a galactic center or a Rome or a New York, just because there isn't a bunch of these capitals that have hegemonic control culturally, militarily, and financially over other parts of the world, does not mean that the rest of the world are savage or barbarians. All right, these are people who have, had access to the same technologies, had access to the same crafts, had access to the same scholarship as everywhere else in the world. In many ways, better. But the difference in who became a colonial power and who didn't was how they chose to apply those crafts. There are some people, i.e. Europe, who chose to use and apply their technological know-how towards conquest and warfare, right? Whereas other smaller nations chose to use them for more artistic and peaceful endeavors. It's not to say that they were completely devoid of violence, but they had no designs on conquering the rest of the planet.
Yeah, I mean that's really powerful analysis that you have there. I mean, and now, I mean, the kind of the historian in me is kind of like really want to kind of expand. And I know we're very short on time, but I definitely want to spend the next time thinking about just different empires, right? I mean, whether we're thinking about like, I mean, for me, it's like some of my pre-modern work as a historian, right? Is like, I mean, I was a medievalist in undergrad. So we're kind of thinking about like feudal systems, right? And the kind of like consolidation of power in those formations. But I also did like kind of like when I was taking or doing work in pre-modern kind of like Middle East, South Asia, is like the gunpowder empires, right? And like what caused the kind of like how did people kind of always look at the borders and the kind of expansion, like military expansion, what purpose did that serve, right? And kind of stabilizing or with the center. So it's like, yeah, like there's conquering peoples, right? Like where people have different cultures where,
sure,
the political formation is on conquest. And I mean, within, like what we do know is that, like in African history, it was like in places where they're like resource rich, like the land is very rich, but their people poor. Like the people are just like, I can go and escape. Like people sought autonomy. The reality is that that in many places where people could leave and make a living for themselves, they chose freedom, and that meant not taking a bunch of possessions, not having oppressive social systems that included social like oppressive food systems, but they sought ways to not have the control of these powerful states. So I do think that when people are writing about societies or universe, and like expansion, that they really have not studied history, or if they have, they've only studied a certain type of history that is focused on just telling the stories of great men, great leaders, and these states, as opposed to the histories of like how people's culture shifted and they expanded. When you look at the history from the bottom down, which that's what makes it so interesting when you show what was life like for the peasants, the farmers, like people who maybe had to navigate an empire. That's also like very interesting. So, but
Good
like I
point.
think overall we have to really try to break ourselves out of Eurocentric history telling, and look at how do people live, right? How did people live for thousands of years? And knowing that those are sustainable. But what we always imagine is sort of like the future of like, or our imagined future of how the Roman Empire was, or how even these empires operated. Because a lot of times, for a lot of people, they're just like, we don't even really care who's in power as much. It doesn't really bother us. Like, as long as we're just kind of left alone and able to enjoy our village life. Because that was the average living that we had. But
Right.
now we have, with rapid, like, global urbanization, you have people moving to these cores and that they're now completely dependent upon the state for everything, and those social systems that we have. So I think it would be really interesting if we actually had some really cool historians, sociologists, community organizers to actually start to do some sci-fi storytelling. So I think we could get at
Yes.
some really
Yes.
cool social systems.
Yes. I also, I want to like see if I can't get a couple of, because I know that I'm going to say this real quick. I know that like I'm a blunt instrument when it comes to my the things that I say about history. Like I'm not a historian, so I will say something that's very general and probably not completely accurate. And I acknowledge that just because I'm not really equipped to say something more specific. But in addition to yourself, I think it'd be cool to get a historian or two on the show, right? So that you guys can go at it and sort of help contextualize some of the things that we see, some of the tropes that we see, on television and in films. That would be great.
Definitely. I mean, I look forward to that. I mean, and so for me, it's like as a kind of, I mean, I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for social systems that are tropey, like, yeah,
Yes.
like having an empire, what does that mean? When we know there's much more complexity
Yes.
in that. So it's like the empire itself, like right now for the film, for the series, we need that one person as opposed to understanding the bureaucracy or the economics that would make like lead to stagnation and an ultimate collapse of that. So that's where I'm
Ooh,
like, I'm
I want to
definitely,
talk about that. I want
yeah,
to take a note on that because the bureaucratic element was something that I was contemplating last night and I forgot to write it down. Well, I want to talk about it next week. We did have a lot to unpack. Like it's completely fine that we tried to restrain ourselves a little bit. So it's
a
completely fine that
little
we went
bit.
over.
We did
Well,
pretty much
we
close.
we're doing two shows now. We're doing two shows now, and well, we're doing two shows now, and one of the shows had two episodes, and so we had a very dense week. Next week will probably be a little bit easier. But I do want to wrap this up. Um, so if you have any final comments, please offer them now so I can.
Yeah. Hey, writers. N.K. Jemisin is really great at world building, doing that stuff. Take some master classes of understanding the logics of society, and how things work, because it just gets really tropey when you just have like one person that's embodying everything in power and not understanding, like there's just a lot of great things you could add by like other players in that you could actually decenter the emperor, right, and have like really compelling stories about everyday people. So let's do some everyday stories and
Yes, and hire those
push those
people.
to the background. Yeah, hire good
Hi-
writers,
hire the NK Jemisons, hire the Netio Corfors, hire them to at the least consult on your scripts and at best pay them well and have them help you write them. So if they're interested, that is. So, but having said that, I want to thank everybody for coming in. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do us a grand old favor because you're going to help us monetize. Like this video, subscribe to this video, share, get other people to do so, and get your friends to come in to watch us. Thank you again, Margari, as usual. It's been a pleasure to sit here and talk with you about some great nerd stuff. I'm looking forward to next week. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody also next week. So until then, have a good weekend, and we'll see you next Saturday.